I was 15 years old when I signed a piece of paper that said I killed a man I never even met. I didn't do it. I want you to remember that, because for the next 12 years, almost nobody did. The detective told me if I just said the words, I could go home. I was 15, I believed him. By the time I found out what those words actually meant, I was already sitting in a courtroom, listening to a judge decide whether I'd spend the rest of my life in prison for a crime committed by someone I trusted more than anyone else in the world. My name is Devon Marsh. Before any of this happened, I was just a kid in Flint, Michigan, trying to stay out of the way. My mom, Gloria, worked 2 jobs, days at a laundromat, nights cleaning offices downtown. She left before sunrise and came home after we were supposed to be asleep. She never stopped believing in us, but she also wasn't around enough to catch the things that were starting to go wrong. I had one brother, Tyrell, 4 years older than me. He was everything I wanted to be, confident, fast-talking, never scared of anybody. Kids on our block respected him. Girls liked him. I followed him everywhere, copied the way he walked, the way he talked to people. I didn't know yet that following him would cost me my childhood. Our apartment was small, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen table with a wobbly leg my mom kept meaning to fix. But it was ours, and on the nights she was actually home, we'd eat dinner together, and she'd ask about school, and for a few hours, everything felt normal. I didn't know how much was about to change. Tyrell started running with older guys that summer, guys who hung around the corner store past midnight, guys my mother used to cross the street to avoid. I noticed the signs before I understood them. New shoes he couldn't afford on a part-time job. Phone calls he'd take outside, pacing, voice low. Nights he didn't come home until morning, sneaking in through the fire escape so Mom wouldn't hear the front door. I asked him once what he was into. "Don't worry about it, Dev. Just don't tell Ma." I didn't tell Ma. That was my first mistake. There was a night in September I still think about. Tyrell came home with a busted lip and wouldn't say who did it. He sat on the edge of my bed at 2 a.m., and for a second he looked scared. Actually scared, not the confident older brother I knew. "You good?" I asked him. "Yeah. Go back to sleep." I should have pushed harder. I didn't. A few weeks later, I heard him on the phone with someone named Curtis, arguing about money. "I told you I'm handling it," Tyrell kept saying. I didn't know who Curtis was yet. I would. One night in October, there was a robbery 2 blocks from our house. A convenience store owner named Arthur Beck was shot during the robbery and died the next morning at the hospital. It was on the local news before I even knew the details. A grainy photo of the storefront, police tape, a reporter saying, "No suspects in custody yet." I didn't know anything about it, not that night. 3 days later, police showed up at our door, asking for Tyrell. He wasn't home. He hadn't been home in 2 days, actually, which should have told me something. I was. They took me in for questioning. No lawyer. My mother wasn't allowed in the room at first. They told her it would go faster if she waited outside, that I wasn't a suspect, just a witness. She believed them. I don't blame her. Most people would have. I sat across from Detective Raymond Doyle, a man twice my size with 20 years on the force and a case he badly needed closed. The city was watching, a murdered store owner, a community demanding answers, and a detective under pressure from every direction to make an arrest. "We know your brother was there, Devon. We know you were with him. Just tell us what happened, and you can go home tonight." "I wasn't there. I don't know what happened." He didn't believe me. He leaned back in his chair like he had all the time in the world. "Your brother already told us you were involved. He said you had the gun." That was a lie. I know that now. I didn't know it then. For 6 hours, he told me variations of the same story, that Tyrell had confessed, that Tyrell said I fired the gun, that the only way to help myself was to admit what really happened. He brought in coffee, then soda, like he was doing me a favor. He raised his voice, then softened it, then raised it again. Good cop, bad cop, played by one exhausted man in an interrogation room with no windows. I was 15, I hadn't slept, I hadn't eaten, and I kept hearing the same 4 words on a loop. "You can go home." At hour 6, I broke. Okay, I did it. Can I go home now?" He slid a piece of paper across the table. I signed it without reading half of it. I thought signing a piece of paper was how you ended a bad day. I didn't understand that I just ended my childhood. My public defender, Sarah Whitfield, met me for the first time 2 days before my arraignment. She had 30 other cases that month. She told me, years later, that something about my file never sat right with her. The confession came together too fast, too clean. But she didn't have the time, the investigators, or the resources to unravel it. The system wasn't built for kids like me to get a real defense. It was built to move fast. I was tried as an adult, 15 years old, and the state of Michigan stood in front of a jury and called me a murderer. Here's what nobody knew at the time. Not the jury, not the judge, not even my own mother. Tyrell was there that night, but he wasn't the shooter, neither was I. The actual gunman was a 22-year-old named Curtis Hale, the same Curtis I'd heard Tyrell arguing with on the phone weeks earlier. Tyrell owed him money. The robbery was supposed to be quick, quiet, no one hurt. It went wrong the second Arthur Beck reached for something under the counter, and Curtis panicked and fired. Tyrell ran. When police started closing in on our house days later, he had a choice to make. He could tell the truth and implicate Curtis, a man he was terrified of, or he could stay quiet and let the blame land somewhere else. It landed on me. I was a minor. He told himself I'd get a lighter sentence, that the system would go easy on a kid. He was wrong, and even if he'd been right, it wouldn't have made it forgivable. He let his little brother take a murder charge to protect himself from a man he owed money to. I served 12 years before Tyrell, dying of liver disease at 34, finally told our mother the truth from a hospital bed. She drove straight from that hospital to the offices of a wrongful conviction organization and didn't leave until someone agreed to look at my file. Marcus Reyes was the attorney who took my case. The first time he sat across from me in a visiting room, he didn't talk like a lawyer. He talked like someone who was actually angry on my behalf. Devon, we pulled the original interrogation logs. 6 hours, no attorney present until the final 20 minutes. Doyle's notes don't match the timeline he gave in his own report. We think we can get this conviction overturned. I'd stopped letting myself hope for anything by that point. Hope had cost me too much already. But Marcus kept showing up, kept filing motions, kept finding cracks in a story that had been treated as solid fact for over a decade. 2 years of appeals later, I stood in the same courthouse that convicted me at 15. I was 27 now, older than Detective Doyle had been when he first sat across from me. The judge reviewed the findings out loud, the coerced confession, the fabricated claim that Tyrell had implicated me, and Curtis Hale's own confession, given years later during an unrelated prison sentence, admitting he was the shooter and that Devon Marsh had never been present that night. The conviction is vacated. I didn't cry, I just felt tired. 12 years tired. My mother was in the front row. She'd aged what felt like 20 years in the time it took the judge to read that sentence. She hugged me outside the courthouse steps, gripping my jacket like she was scared I might disappear again. "I never stopped saying it," she whispered. "I never stopped saying my son didn't do it." I walked out of that courthouse at 27 with almost nothing. No job history, no credit, no driver's license. I didn't know how to use half the technology solution had shown up in the world while I was gone. The state eventually gave me a compensation check, years later, after another fight in civil court, money that could never buy back the years it was meant to replace. Tyrell died before I ever got the chance to look him in the eye as a free man. Some days I've made peace with that. Some nights I haven't. I think I probably never fully will. Sarah Whitfield, my old public defender, reached out after the exoneration. She cried on the phone. She said she thought about my case for years. I told her it wasn't her fault. I don't think she believed me, but I meant it. People assume the justice system exists to find the truth. Sometimes it exists to close a case as fast as possible, and the truth becomes optional. I learned that the hardest way there is that a scared 15-year-old will say almost anything if an adult with authority tells him it'll get him home faster. I learned that loyalty to the wrong person can cost you more than you ever imagined giving up. And I learned that even after everything, it's possible to walk out the other side without becoming as bitter as you have every right to be. If there's one thing I want you to take from my story, it's this: believe kids when they say they didn't do it. Ask more questions before accepting a confession as fact, and never assume the system got it right just because it moved fast. If this story moved you, let me know in the comments, and subscribe for more stories like mine. There are more of us out there than you'd think.